now we're moving on to our next speaker, Ms. Michelle Santiago. I'm very glad to see a member of the Fourth Estate here. She's a reporter for the Arab Times in the state of Kuwait. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Clark. Dr. Mohammed Matar, my fellow speakers, SAIS staff, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure and honor to be attending this symposium today and be invited to speak on the role of the media in exposing the plight of Filipino domestic workers, or better referred to as household service workers in Kuwait and the Middle East. What has brought me here today? It all started with an email from Stanley Seiden of SAIS last February to our editor at the Arab Times, asking for my contact details. Though reluctant and with a subtle warning tone from our editor, with a look that says, you know what human rights groups are, and be sure to stay out of trouble. But still, he gave me the email. It's good to know that someone from this part of the world has been reading my articles on the Arab Times about the plight of Filipino HSWs in Kuwait and the various forms of abuses committed against them. To cut the story short, I met with Stanley and his group that included Julia Braun-Miller here in March, and shared with them some insights from the media's perspective on the abuses on HSWs in Kuwait. Fast forward November, here I am, invited by SAIS, thank you, Dr. Matar, and I was requested to speak at the symposium. At first, I was having second thoughts if I should speak or not, as I wanted to go back in Kuwait in one piece. Because I just told our editor, I'm just hieing off to DC, just be out of the sandbox for a while and marvel at the autumn leaves. Anyway, I'll make up a good excuse later on. I'll just do that. Okay. I love autumn, by the way. As my fellow speakers have already provided you a very comprehensive overview of the role of policymakers and foreign representations in combating the exploitation of domestic workers, I will make my talk concise and vivid on how the media can help in exposing abuses on HSWs in Kuwait and some parts of the Middle East. Looking back, being a newspaper reporter in Kuwait and a correspondent of the ABS-CBN Middle East News Bureau, the Filipino channel, for the past 14 years, I can happily say, thank God, I survived. Working as a journalist in Kuwait and in the GCC countries gives you a very unique and challenging experience. The Middle East landscape, its culture and tradition, directly or indirectly affect media practices and operations. Kuwait has the freest press among the GCC countries, according to the Reporters Without Borders 2013 World Press Freedom Index. Kuwait ranks 77th, trailing behind is Qatar on the 110th spot, while the United Arab Emirates ranks 114th. Kuwait has two English dailies, Kuwait Times and the Arab Times, which I work for. Over a dozen Arabic dailies, magazines. There is the state-owned television KTV and some radio stations, as well as a few privately owned TV and radio stations. Despite being tagged as having the freest press, reporting abuses on domestic workers or Filipino HSWs in Kuwait is no easy task, especially if the perpetrators are high-ranking government officials, members of the royal family, or even just ordinary citizens. There is always the possibility of reprisal, ending up in jail, and eventually facing deportation for expat journalists. In November 2003, I wrote an article about a runaway Filipino household service worker who was raped by 3 Kuwaiti policemen at the Sabah al-Salem police station when she was in their custody awaiting her repatriation to the Philippines. I followed through her case from day one till the conviction of the suspects with due diligence. This was my litmus test as a journalist covering abuses on domestic workers, developing a certain style that will allow you to get the message across without getting into trouble with authorities or the host government. First, get official statement from the embassy. Second, get the lawyer of the victim or the suspect's lawyer to talk. Third, get a first-hand account from the victim. Fourth, everything should be recorded and documented. Fifth, and the most important of all, practice self-censorship. Yes, you've heard it right, self-censorship. Last year, a similar case, another HSW was raped by Kuwaiti police at the back of the patrol car, beat her up, stabbed her several times on the neck, and left her half dead on the desert. I did a story on her, and a Kuwaiti human rights lawyer, Sheikha Fawzia Al-Sabah, after reading my story, contacted me and volunteered to be her lawyer for free. The suspect is in jail and the case is ongoing. Though Kuwait is said to have the freest press, there is also an unwritten rule on self-censorship. Despite this limitation, I have continued reporting on the plight of Filipino HSWs in Kuwait. Working with this limitation does not prevent us from exposing the issues of Filipino HSWs and being instrumental in the rescue of some distressed workers then and now. For instance, as a correspondent and consultant of the ABS-CBN Middle East News Bureau, I get to receive daily a number of phone calls, emails, and private messages on Facebook and even tweets from some distressed HSWs who have access to the internet, or from their relatives or friends begging for help to extract them from their abusive employers. If the distressed HSW is in Saudi, I forward the email or information to our correspondents in Jeddah, Riyadh, or Dammam, who in turn will inform the Philippine embassy or labor officials to rescue the distressed HSW. By the way, we also have a correspondent in Bahrain. Our bureau has correspondents all over the GCC countries who for the past decade have been helping not only HSWs, but also their other distressed overseas Filipino workers. In Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, over 1,000 undocumented OFWs, of which 80% are runaway maids, have gone in hiding while others sought refuge at the consulate since the deadline on undocumented expatriates to leave the kingdom expired last Monday. Our correspondents there have reported the real situation on the ground and their appeal for help to expedite their repatriation amid the ongoing crackdown there. Reports on HSWs being raped, beaten black and blue, burnt with a flat iron, poured with some bleaching liquid and inserted with chili peppers in her sex organ. Some were left to starve, and numerous lists of inhumane things that you can never imagine can happen to anyone. Most of the distressed HSWs in Kuwait run to the Filipino Workers Resource Center at the Philippine Overseas Labor Office to seek refuge. Others who escape from their abusive employers are lucky after jumping off the window, while others end up paralyzed, fractured, and worse, lifeless on the ground. A few weeks ago, a Filipina HSW died after falling off the 12th floor of the bathroom window. Her employer told authorities that she took her own life by destroying the bathroom window and jumped to her death. But days before her death, the 20-year-old HSW had sent text messages to her husband in the Philippines detailing the verbal abuse she had been suffering in the hands of her lady employer and non-payment of salaries for 4 months. After I have reported her case on the paper and on TV, the Philippine Embassy, in cooperation with the Kuwait Criminal Investigation Department, launched a thorough probe on her death. The manpower agency that has deployed her has started coordinating closely with the embassy for fear of being suspended by the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, or POEA. Was it suicide, or was there a foul play? She could have been flown back to the Philippines pronto inside a plain wooden brown box if it wasn't out in the media. Hopefully, authorities can ferret out the truth behind her death. Just last week, I have also interviewed 3 distressed HSWs who ran away from their abusive employers, but they ended up in a brothel in Julay Balshuk, a place where most illegal activities thrive. They were allegedly sold by a Pakistani taxi driver for 250 Kuwaiti dinars, or approximately $750, to the prostitution ring operated by a compatriot. They recounted their harrowing experience of receiving an average of 30 customers per day and how they were beaten up by the ringleader whenever they refused to get to work. The 3 were able to escape from the prostitution den and are now at the FWRC. The embassy is coordinating with Kuwaiti authorities to raid the brothel to arrest the suspects. With these never-ending stories of abuses, there has been a call for a moratorium on the deployment of HSWs to Kuwait by several Filipino organizations, and appealed that deployment be resumed only if an agreement is forged between Kuwait and the Philippines, providing full protection to over 80,000 HSWs in Kuwait. The moratorium petition was signed by over 10,000 OFWs in Kuwait and submitted to the Philippine government, but no news to date. In the spirit of truth and fair play, it's not always bad news, okay? We also report a share of good news from the Kuwaiti authorities and how the host government has been trying its best to solve the vicious cycle of runaway maids by easing the repatriation procedures. Last October, a total of 57 distressed HSWs were repatriated to the Philippines without passing through the Talha, or deportation center. After completing their travel documents, they were taken by the embassy straight to the airport. This was made possible with the help of the Kuwait Ministry of Interior. There are also times that the Kuwait's Office of Domestic Workers Affairs donates plane tickets to the distressed OFWs. The Kuwait government has begun operating recently a huge shelter that can accommodate over 700 distressed domestic workers of various nationalities, fully equipped with facilities while they await repatriation. We always give where credit is due. I can go on the whole day outlining unimaginable abuses committed by employers against HSWs. But is it just enough for media to expose the string of abuses on HSWs? Is it just enough that media draw a compelling and juicy narrative that whets the appetite of any reader or televiewer? How I wish the media in Kuwait can do more, but we can only do much considering the limitations. We need people like you from the international community to rally behind the media's efforts. There is an urgent need for Philippine and Kuwaiti government officials to sit down and map out plans and forge an agreement on how to better protect and uphold the rights of HSWs as well as the rights of the employers. It's better said than done, but I believe it can be done. The road may be very bumpy ahead, but a strong resolve will get us there. We just have to take that one big step now. Thank you.
Ms. Santiago, thank you for this exposition of the power of the media in exposing stories of our issue. I'd like